Hi, this is Dustin with Dustin's Dollars, and today I'm going to talk about some of the data I could find on how large the total addressable market is for security robots. Um, so before I get in real quick, let me give you my standard note that I am not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I may own investments in some of the companies discussed in this video. So basically this video should be for your entertainment only because I could be wrong about everything that I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. So that being said, I think I'm excited about Knightscope and I am still investigating AITX. And the reason for both of those, really underlying both of those, is the humongous total addressable market for security robots. And it is basically wide open, right? There is not an established player that owns the vast majority of this market. Right, the market is in its infancy, and so I think it's really important to understand, or at least have a good idea of how big this market could be when you're looking at your future growth projections for these companies and what's realistic. And today I'm going to go through some of the data that I have found, and that is gets me excited about these companies, potentially as investments, or the sector as something that's going to grow to be much larger than it is today, and that the companies that do well in this space are going to have a very bright future, I think. So getting into it, I found a couple of publicly available websites from analysts of some sort. Just to go through these, I don't have any particular opinion on how credible any of these are. I'm just sort of looking at all of them to get a general sense of what the projections are, because nobody really knows. But so looking through a couple of these, this is some place called Mordor Intelligence, pretty interesting name. And so this is about the security robot market, and they expect that by 2026, the market is going to grow to $19.77 billion. Very specific, and that really is going to grow at a compound annual growth rate of about 14% over the next 5 years. And this is as of 2021. They must have written this report. And so I thought that's at least one good data point to start with. There is another research report from Industry Arc about security robots, and they came up with a number that was almost exactly the same, 19.78 billion, a CAGR of 15% over that 5-year period. It wasn't obvious to me if they maybe shared some underlying data, and this is actually telling me the same thing, but the numbers do come out slightly differently, right, as they state them here. So they kind of agree with one another. Found another report. This came from Market Study Report LLC, whatever that is, but this was a PR released by them in March of 2021 that suggests that the market is going to grow at an 8% CAGR, right? And that's much lower, like it's half the compound annual growth rate, reaching a market size of $4 billion in 2027. So that I felt was obviously much smaller than the others. Seemed a little low, but who knows? Again, I don't know. But I felt any of these are actually interesting, because when we're talking billions and billions of dollars for the market in the next 5 years, at least the companies that I have looked at that are publicly investable, Knightscope and AITX, both of them are tiny fractions of that amount at present, right? They are, I think, less than, revenues are for both of the companies, I think, are less than 1% of that, right? So that implies to me there is lots and lots and lots of growth, right? Each of those companies could double and double and double and double, and still what maybe be scratching, even after, what does I say, 4 doubles, maybe be scratching 10% of that market. So that's pretty, I think, pretty good in my opinion. That shows there is lots of room for growth, especially over the next 5 years. And I think that it's actually a little bit of a feedback loop, right? Whereas these companies grow and the robots get better and get better capabilities, that will actually then fuel the growth of the market, because this is the actual security robot market, and that is going to some degree be limited by the companies themselves and the capabilities of those robots that are going to be able to actually serve the purpose that the clients would want. Another way that I wanted to look at this was also just what's the broader physical security market. And this is another research report I was able to find just on overall physical security, and have a little more. But this particular report expects that the physical security market is going to grow from 102 billion in 2021 to 140 billion by 2026, calling this a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of 6.4% over that period. And obviously the total physical security market isn't going to grow as fast as the security robots market, because really that security robots is taking some of this market share from humans, really, so to speak. So that's, I think, makes sense that the CAGR for the overall, the broader market is going to be lower, but that, part of this actually, I think, probably would be the security robots. And I don't have access to the full report. I'm not going to pay. I think they were, charging, $7,000. I'm not going to pay that to get access to the report, but I think it's, I suspect that the security robots are probably included in this, but who knows, right? I mean, robots are physical, but it's not obvious to me if they actually are or not. But another way to look at this, and this is, you can believe or not believe this. I know some folks have their own opinions on when companies put out their corporate presentations, but I think this comes from the Knightscope's investor presentation deck, and so they are modeling this as all of the number of security guards that exist, and then just putting a percent on how many they think would be augmented by robots. And they call it augmented. I think that's probably a bit generous in the sense that, like, some of these are not just augmentations; they're going to be replacing human guards and officers. But I think it's a good way to model this in terms of what percent of security guards could be replaced or could be augmented, if you want to use that term, with security robots. And they say near term, which they define as the next 10 years, right? So that would be up through 2032, if you want to call it that. They think that there might be an opportunity for 2% at that point, right? And they call that out as 36,000 robots in a 10-year time span. And they say that their long-term, which would be more than 10 years, would be 20%, which would be a total of 360,000 robots. I think that's and then they multiply that out with what their costs are per robot, and they call that the 10-year market opportunity as $4.1 billion, and in the long term, at the 20%, the $41 billion. And I think those, that $4.1 billion is low compared to the overall security robot market size that was in some of these reports that I already mentioned. But it's at least another data point for us to consider. And I think it's actually a reasonable way to think about to form a model of how many security robots might be deployed in the long term, right? To think about the question of how many security guards are there, and what percent of those security guards could be replaced and or augmented by security robots. And I think, the answer isn't 100%. I'm sorry. Maybe in the long term, the robots will be able to completely replace security guards. I don't suspect that we're anywhere near that, especially with the current functionality you see from these companies. But I think there are some instances where the robots are good enough, right? You don't actually need a human with full education to do what is needed, and that is just to have a physical presence to deter and monitor. So I think seems realistic to me, that maybe over 10 years, 2% of the market could actually be augmented by robots, and longer term, 20% seems reasonable to me. And as sort of another way to then let's think about those percentage numbers, I looked at the actual government statistics from the Bureau of Labor and U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and how many security guards are there, and how many do they expect over the next 10 years to be hired. And right now there's about 1.07 million security guards in the U.S. And then by the end of 2030, they expect about 1.2 million if you add those up. And so if there were 1.2 million security guards, but actually 2% of those were replaced by robots, that would be 1.2 million, get that right, 24,000 security robots, or 24,000 security guard equivalents, which might actually be less robots if you figure a security guard is, going to work 40 hours a week, not 24 hours a week. So from that perspective, maybe it is smaller. However, I did actually want to call out that in Knightscope's market sizing, they listed law enforcement as effectively being equal to all of the security guards verticals combined. And, so that would actually be, doubling those numbers in terms of just taking versus just taking security guards into account. Another thing that I looked at was, I just went to Indeed.com and searched in the United States, how many security guard positions are currently open right now. And you can see here there are, maybe that's too small for you to see, there are 78,000, roughly speaking, security guard jobs listed right now in the United States. I thought it was interesting that some of these actually are through Securitas, and there were some, I think, down here from Allied, from the other big company. I don't see them right at the moment. I had looked at this the other day, and I saw some that were through Allied. It was Allied Universal. And so that was interesting to see that those companies are there. And then I also look at sort of what are the wages for these, right? If I'm thinking just a sort of sanity check, how much might a company be willing to pay for a security robot? You're seeing that these positions are listing 17 to 18, 18 to 52, $14, $22, 15 to 24, 17. So you can see these wages are ranging around, in the high teens, maybe $20, maybe around $20 in some of the more expensive areas of the country. But I think, if security guards have some wiggle room to be cheaper than these wages at, let's just call it $18 an hour as a sort of rough average here. Then they also have benefits on top of it. And then they also have to deal with, turnover costs and other costs that are really hidden there but are very real costs from the company's perspective who would be employing these security guards. And I think that, now all of a sudden the security robots that are able to operate at, stated numbers around $3 to $9 an hour. At least I know that's what Knightscope advertises. Even if it's $9 an hour, that compares very favorably to, $18 an hour plus benefits that, you see a lot of these do provide. I clicked through a couple and a lot of them did say benefits, at least some benefits with them. And so I thought that was at least good for me to convince me that there is the unit economics will work out, and that there actually, I think, is some pricing power built in, right? That they could actually raise the cost of security robots a bit and still come out pretty favorably towards a human security guard. And I actually clicked through a couple of these. A lot of these don't require any experience, any prior experience. They don't require any education other than a high school diploma. They aren't armed guard positions, right? So this is, I think, something that would be fairly well covered in a lot of instances, in terms of experience and the qualifications by a security robot. Now, the other macro factor that I didn't want to talk about is, and this is maybe only true in the near term, right? This could reverse because these things do change over time pretty quickly. But the unemployment rate, right? You see the trend in unemployment rate we were pretty low before the pandemic hit, spiked up, obviously, for reasons. But then it's come back down. We are back down to about this, 4% unemployment rate, where now we kind of have this labor shortage, right? And you actually see a lot of this on the news. I didn't pull up any news stories, but it's seems to be at least popular in the news, and seems to be the case that there's actually a shortage of labor, and that is actually causing wages to rise, right? I had this, this is the employment report, and the BLS, the government agency, states that over the past 12 months, hourly average earnings have increased by 5.7%. Right, so wages are rising, over the past year, they rose by 5.7%. And I actually went down here. This is from this left column is January 2021. This was January 2022. This is the hourly rate, and I kind of went down here to what I thought were roughly the equivalent, right? I think this would probably fall under probably either under probably I think this falls under other services, right? And you can see this went from 22.98 to 24.43, and that just by itself, 24.43 divided by 22.98, right? That in and of itself is a 6.3% increase. I think if you're looking at the let's say maybe similar jobs that maybe this could be classified under leisure and hospitality, you can see that actually rose even more quickly, right? 1485 to 1708 over the past year. And so, this paints this gives basically, tailwinds at the macro level, right? Where it is becoming, we have a shortage of people at the time that wages are rising, right? So we can't find people to fill the positions, and we have to pay more for the people we do have, which both of those factors make it more and more attractive, I think, for security robots, right? So I think that provides some good near-term tailwinds to these companies. And when we look at the market, right, we see the market growing. We see that somewhere between 8 to 15%, compound annual growth rate for security robots of a market that's in the billions, right? And then the market that is disrupting is one that is projected to be at 100. It's at 100 billion now. It's projected to be 140 billion. I think it was in 5 years or 7 years or something. And I think that's a good recipe for this, just exploding, right? For lots of robots to be filling a need, right? The need is there, and this is the point that I am just looking at. Goes into my thesis, right? For actually why I am interested in currently invested in Knightscope, why I am still evaluating AITX is because I think this market is huge. It is actively growing. It's potentially even accelerating because of these macro factors, and I actually don't think that this is an either or. I know that some of the folks online seem to be really, really into one or the other. I am currently invested in Knightscope and not AITX, but I think the market is there where both companies are successful. You can have multiple winners here very easily that grow well beyond their current size. So yeah, that is what I wanted to cover today. Just sort of how I see the market going and what I see as favorable macro factors for this market. So thank you for watching. Have a good day.